The war was over, and humanity had won. 3 years of brutal fighting across a dozen star systems had finally ended with the Velrothi Empire signing the armistice. The insectoid aliens had been fierce opponents, their queens leading massive hive fleets that had threatened to overwhelm human space. But human ingenuity and determination had prevailed, and now the proud Velrothi were scattered across prison camps and labor colonies throughout the galaxy. Jake Morrison stood in the main hangar of New Haven Colony, watching the transport ship lower its cargo ramp. He was tired. The last few months of administrative work had been mind-numbing compared to his days as a combat engineer. But someone had to help rebuild what the war had destroyed. New Haven was an agricultural colony on the edge of human space, and Jake's job was to oversee the integration of Velrothi prisoners into the workforce. Captain Harris walked up beside him, a wide grin on his weathered face. Several other officers followed, all of them sharing the same amused expression. Jake felt a knot form in his stomach. When Harris smiled like that, someone was about to have a very bad day. "Morrison, we've got a special assignment for you," Harris said, clapping him on the shoulder a bit too hard. "Real special." "Sir?" Jake asked, keeping his voice neutral. "Command sent us a VIP prisoner. We all got together and decided you're the perfect person to handle her." The other officers chuckled, and Jake's unease grew stronger. From inside the transport, 2 guards emerged, dragging something between them. At first, Jake thought it was just cargo, but then he saw the chains. Heavy industrial chains, the kind used for securing dangerous machinery. And at the end of those chains was a Velrothi. But not just any Velrothi. Even in her broken state, Jake could tell she had once been magnificent. She was larger than the typical Velrothi soldier, nearly 7 feet tall, with a broader carapace. Her chitinous armor, which should have gleamed with iridescent colors, was cracked and dull. 2 of her 4 arms hung at odd angles, clearly broken and poorly healed. Her wings, those delicate membranes that Velrothi queens used in their mating flights, were torn and scarred. The guards threw her down at Jake's feet. She hit the metal floor hard but made no sound. Didn't even flinch. Her large compound eyes stared at nothing, and Jake noticed that someone had carved identification numbers into her carapace. "Allow me to introduce Kayelith," Harris announced, his voice dripping with mockery. "Former queen of the 7th Hive Fleet. She's the one who glassed the colony on Harper's World, killed about 40,000 civilians, if I remember correctly." Jake felt his blood run cold. Harper's World had been one of the worst atrocities of the war. He remembered seeing the footage, the entire planet's surface turned to radioactive glass. "She's your problem now, Morrison," Harris continued. "Command says she's too dangerous for the regular labor camps, but too valuable to execute. Some politicians think we can use her for research or propaganda, or some such nonsense. Since you're so interested in xenobiology and treating these bugs with kid gloves, we figured you'd be perfect." The other officers laughed openly now. One of them, Lieutenant Parker, stepped forward and kicked the chains. "Good luck, Morrison. Try not to let her eat you in your sleep." They walked away, their laughter echoing through the hangar. Jake stood there, looking down at the broken creature at his feet. This was a test, he realized. They expected him to fail, to either abuse her or be killed by her. Either outcome would prove their point that mercy toward the Velrothi was foolish. Kayelith still hadn't moved. Her breathing was shallow, and Jake could see infection oozing from several cracks in her carapace. How long had she been in those chains? How long since she'd received medical attention? Jake knelt down slowly, keeping his movements calm and predictable. Kayelith's eyes shifted to him, and for a moment, he saw such pure hatred in that alien gaze that he nearly stepped back. But beneath the hatred, he saw something else. Pain, exhaustion, and a deep, crushing shame. "Can you walk?" Jake asked quietly. Kayelith said nothing. Her translator device, a small piece of technology embedded in her throat, was cracked and sparking. She probably couldn't respond even if she wanted to. Jake reached for the chains, and Kylith's body tensed. Her mandibles clicked together in what he recognized as a threat display, and her functioning arms moved slightly, as if preparing to strike, but she was too weak. The movement lasted only a second before she slumped back down. "I'm going to remove these," Jake said, keeping his voice steady. "They're hurting you." He pulled out his multi-tool and began working on the locks. They were old military restraints, designed to be tough, but not impossible to open with the right codes. It took him 15 minutes, and the whole time, Kylith watched him with those unreadable compound eyes. When the last chain fell away, Kylith didn't attack. She didn't run. She simply lay there, as if the chains had been the only thing holding her together. Jake could see the deep grooves they had cut into her carapace, some of them down to the softer tissue beneath. "My home isn't far," Jake said. For a long moment, Kylith didn't respond. Then, slowly, she pushed herself up on her functioning arms. It was clearly agonizing, but she managed to stand. She swayed, nearly fell, but caught herself. Jake didn't try to help her. He had read enough about Velrathi culture to know that physical assistance would be seen as an insult, especially for a queen. Instead, he simply started walking toward the hangar exit, keeping his pace slow. Behind him, he heard the scrape of chitin on metal as Kylith followed. The walk to Jake's quarters took 20 minutes. Normally, it would have taken 5. But Jake kept the pace slow, and Kylith struggled with every step. Several colonists stopped to stare, some with fear, others with anger. One man spat in their direction and shouted something about bug lovers. Jake ignored them all. His home was a simple prefab unit on the edge of the colony, 1 bedroom and a small living area with a kitchenette. It wasn't much, but it was private and quiet. Jake opened the door and stepped inside, then waited. Kylith paused at the threshold. In Velrathi culture, entering another's dwelling was significant. It implied trust, or at least a temporary truce. Jake could see her weighing her options. Finally, she stepped inside. "There's a spare room there," Jake said, pointing to a door on the left. "It's small, but it has a bed. Well, a human bed. I don't know if that works for you." Kylith moved to the door and looked inside. The room was bare, except for a simple cot and a small table. She turned her head back toward Jake, studying him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "I'm going to get some medical supplies," Jake said. "Those infections need treatment, and your translator needs fixing. I'll leave the supplies here, and you can use them if you want. Or not. Your choice." He moved to the kitchenette and began pulling out his first aid kit. It was designed for humans, but he had some general-purpose antiseptics and bandages that should work on Velrathi biology. He also had some spare parts for translator devices from his engineering work. When he turned around, Kylith had moved to the center of the room. She was looking at his shelves, at the books and data pads about xenobiology and alien cultures. Her eyes lingered on a particular text about Velrathi social structures. Jake placed the medical supplies on the table. "I'll make something to eat. Do you? Can you eat human food? I have some protein supplements that might work." No response. Kylith simply stood there, swaying slightly. "Right," Jake said. "I'll just leave it here. You can decide." He moved to the kitchenette and started preparing a simple meal. Behind him, he heard Kylith move into the spare room. The door closed with a soft click. Jake let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. What had he just gotten himself into? Over the next few days, the pattern repeated itself. Jake would leave food and medical supplies outside Kylith's door. Sometimes they were used, sometimes they weren't. She never came out when he was home, and she never spoke. The one time he knocked on her door to check if she was alive, she had hissed at him with such venom that he quickly backed away. The other officers at the colony found his situation hilarious. Every day at work, someone would make a joke about how Morrison was playing house with a bug, or ask if she'd tried to kill him yet. Harris started a betting pool on how long it would take for Kaelith to snap and tear Jake apart. Jake endured it all silently. He had been through worse during the war. Words couldn't hurt him. But the hostility wasn't just coming from the humans. When Jake went to inspect the Velrathi labor camps on the colony's outskirts, he noticed the prisoners watching him differently. Word had spread that he was housing a fallen queen. Some Velrathi looked at him with confusion, others with contempt. A few looked at him with something that might have been hope, though he couldn't be sure. 1 week after Kaelith's arrival, Jake came home to find his living room ransacked. His heart jumped into his throat. Had she finally attacked? Was this her escape attempt? Then he saw her. Kaelith was sitting on the floor, surrounded by his research papers and data pads. Her broken translator had been partially repaired with the parts he'd left for her, and she was reading one of his texts on Velrathi neural biology. She looked up at him as he entered, and for the first time, there was something other than hatred in her eyes. Curiosity, perhaps. Or maybe confusion. This section, she said, her voice emerging as a raspy, distorted sound from the damaged translator. Wrong. Neural clusters not arranged this way. Human researchers misunderstood the imaging. Jake stood there, stunned. Those were the first words she had spoken to him. Kaelith turned back to the papers, dismissing him. But Jake noticed that the medical supplies were gone from outside her door, and several of the infections on her carapace looked cleaner. She was healing. It wasn't much. It wasn't forgiveness or friendship, or even basic civility. But it was a start. Jake pulled up a chair and sat down across from her, careful to keep his distance. "Show me what's wrong," he said. "I want to learn." Kaelith's mandibles clicked softly. Then, slowly, she began to explain. The corrections Kaelith made to Jake's research were detailed and precise. She pointed out errors that human scientists had been making for years, misunderstandings about how Velrathi nervous systems processed information. Jake listened carefully, taking notes on his datapad, asking questions when he didn't understand. Kaelith answered most of them, though sometimes she would simply stop talking and stare at nothing, lost in memories that Jake couldn't access. After that first night, things changed slowly. Kaelith still kept to her room most of the time, but occasionally, Jake would come home to find her in the living area, reading his books, or watching the news feeds on his screen. She never greeted him, never acknowledged his presence, unless he spoke first. But she stopped, hiding completely. Jake established a routine. Every morning before work, he would prepare 2 meals, one for himself and one for Kaelith. He'd leave hers on the table and eat his own quickly before heading out. When he returned in the evening, her plate would be empty. He'd prepare dinner the same way, and they would eat in silence, often on opposite sides of the room. 2 weeks after her arrival, Jake came home to find Kaelith examining his collection of alien artifacts. He had gathered them during the war, small things that caught his interest, tokens from different worlds he had visited. She was holding a piece of crystallized amber from a Velrathi world, turning it over in her functioning hands. "That's from Velrath Prime," Jake said carefully. "I found it in the ruins after the battle there." Kaelith's mandibles clicked sharply. "You were at the Prime?" "Yes. I was part of the engineering corps. We were tasked with securing the orbital platforms after your fleet retreated. My hive defended that platform," Kaelith said quietly. "We held for 6 days before the evacuation order came. Many of my daughters died there." Jake hadn't known what to say to that. The war had been brutal on both sides, filled with losses and grief. He set down his bag and moved to the kitchenette, starting on dinner preparations. "Why do you keep these things?" Kaelith asked, still holding the amber. "Trophies of victory?" "No," Jake said. "Reminders. The war took a lot from everyone. I keep them so I don't forget that there were real people, real lives, on both sides. It helps me remember why I never want another war." Kaelith was silent for a long moment. Then she carefully placed the amber back on the shelf. "You are strange for a human. I get that a lot. Over the following weeks, their conversations grew longer. Kylith began to ask questions about human culture, about why they structured their societies so differently from the Velrathi. She seemed particularly fascinated by the concept of individual rights, the idea that each person could choose their own path rather than being born into a predetermined role. In the hive, every Velrathi knows their purpose from hatching, she explained one evening. The workers, the soldiers, the drones, all have their place. The queen guides them, connects them through pheromones and neural links. They are part of her, and she is part of them. To be separated from the hive is to lose yourself. Is that how you feel? Jake asked. Lost? Kylith's large eyes fixed on him. I am nothing now. A queen without a hive is not a queen. I am just empty shell, waiting to die. The raw pain in her voice caught Jake off guard. You're not just a shell. You're still you, still Kylith. Your worth doesn't come from what you rule, it comes from who you are. Humans think this way, Kylith said, shaking her head. But Velrathi are different. We are what we do for the hive. Without that purpose, we are nothing. Then find a new purpose, Jake said. You helped me correct my research. That has value. You could do more. Kylith didn't respond, but Jake could see her thinking about it. The next day, he came home to find a datapad on the table, with pages and pages of notes. Kylith had gone through his entire collection of xenobiology texts and corrected every error she could find. The work must have taken her all day. Jake started bringing home more research materials, and Kylith began helping him with his work. He was studying methods to improve crop yields using alien plant species, and her knowledge of biochemistry was far beyond his own. Together, they developed a new irrigation system that increased production by 30%. Jake submitted the findings under both their names, though he knew it would cause problems. It did. Harris called him into his office the next day, his face red with anger. You put a Velrathi's name on an official colony report? Harris shouted. She did half the work, Jake said calmly. She deserves credit. She's a prisoner, Morrison. A war criminal. She doesn't get credit for anything except the people she murdered. She's also a scientist who's helping improve our food production. That matters. Harris leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You're making yourself a target, Morrison. People are talking. They think you've gone soft, that you're sympathizing with the enemy. Some are saying worse things than that. I don't care what they say. You should, because if you keep this up, I won't be able to protect you. Jake met his gaze steadily. I'm not asking for protection, sir. I'm asking to do my job and treat a sentient being with basic dignity. If that's a problem, then maybe the problem isn't with me. He walked out before Harris could respond. His hands were shaking, but he kept his head up. He had meant every word. The hostility increased after that. Someone spray-painted "Bug Lover" on Jake's door. His requests for equipment started getting denied or delayed. In the mess hall, people stopped sitting near him. A few colonists he had thought were friends turned their backs when he approached. But Jake also noticed something else. A few people, a small minority, started asking questions. A young technician named Danny approached him one day and asked about the irrigation project. A medical officer named Lisa wanted to know more about Velrathi biology for treating prisoners in the camps. Not everyone was against him. At home, Kylith was changing too. Her wounds had healed, and while her broken arms would never fully recover, she had regained much of her mobility. She started maintaining the living space, keeping things organized in a way that Jake appreciated. She even attempted to cook a human meal once, though the results were nearly inedible. Jake ate it anyway, and he could have sworn he saw her mandibles twitch in what might have been amusement. One evening, Jake found her reading something different. Not a science text, but a book of human poetry. She looked up when he entered, almost embarrassed. I found this on your shelf, she said. The words are strange, but beautiful. Humans express emotion differently than Velrothi. We use pheromones and neural harmonics. You use these symbols, these sounds. It's inefficient but somehow more personal. Jake smiled. We have our own kind of beauty. So do the Velrothi. During the war, I once intercepted a Velrothi transmission. It was some kind of song, I think. A battle hymn, or maybe a prayer. I didn't understand the words, but the sound of it stayed with me. It was haunting. Kaelith's posture shifted. We have songs. The queen sings to her hive, and the hive sings back. It is how we share joy, sorrow, purpose. I haven't sung since. She trailed off, her voice catching. Since you lost them? Jake finished quietly. Yes. They sat in silence for a while. Then, Kaelith began to hum, a low vibration that resonated in ways human vocal cords couldn't match. It was beautiful, and alien, and deeply sad. Jake listened until she finished, and when she looked at him, he saw something he had never seen before in those compound eyes. Trust. The next day brought new challenges. Jake was called to inspect a disturbance at one of the labor camps. When he arrived, he found a group of Velrothi prisoners, refusing to work. The human guards were threatening them with shock batons, but the Velrothi weren't backing down. What's going on? Jake asked the senior guard. These bugs are refusing orders. The guard spat. We told them to clear debris from the collapsed storage unit. And they just stopped working. Started making those clicking sounds at each other. Jake approached the Velrothi carefully. There were about 20 of them. All workers, judging by their smaller size and specialized limbs. They were agitated, their mandibles clicking rapidly in what Jake recognized as distress signals. Does anyone here speak standard? Jake asked. One of the Velrothi stepped forward, an older worker with a scarred carapace. His translator crackled when he spoke. The collapsed unit is not safe. Structural supports are failing. Send us in there. We die. Jake examined the building. The guard was right that it needed to be cleared, but the Velrothi was also right that it looked dangerous. Why didn't you report this to your supervisors? The Velrothi workers' mandibles clicked in what might have been bitter laughter. Report to humans? They not listen to us. We are just bugs. Just tools. The words hit Jake harder than he expected. How many times had he heard his fellow humans use that exact language? How many times had he stayed silent? I'll check it myself, Jake said. If it's unsafe, we'll find another way. I'll time. The guards protested, but Jake pulled rank. He entered the building carefully, using his engineering scanner to check the supports. The Velrothi had been right. The whole structure was on the verge of collapse. Sending anyone in there would have been suicide. He came back out and ordered the building sealed until it could be properly stabilized. The guards were angry, but they couldn't argue with his assessment. The Velrothi workers watched him with what seemed like surprise. As Jake left, the older worker approached him. You are Morrison, the one who houses the fallen queen. Yes. The worker's antennae twitched. You are different from other humans. Queen Kaelith chose well. She didn't choose me. She was assigned to me. No, the worker said firmly. She could have killed you first night. Could have escaped. But she stays. She chooses. That means something. Jake thought about that all the way home. When he arrived, he found Kaelith working on a new project. Something she had started on her own. She had been analyzing the colony's entire agricultural system and had developed a comprehensive plan to improve efficiency across all operations. This is incredible, Jake said, reading through her notes. This could change everything. We need to present this to the colony council. Kaelith's posture stiffened. They will not listen. I am the enemy. They'll listen to the data. Good ideas. Don't care where they come from. You are naive, Jake Morrison. But it is a good naivety. Very human. For the first time since they met, Jake heard her use his name. Not just human, or Morrison. But Jake. It felt like a victory. Small, but significant. "Will you help me present it?" Jake asked. Kalith was quiet for a long moment. Then she clicked her mandibles softly. A gesture Jake had learned meant acceptance. "Yes, I will help." The colony council meeting was scheduled for the following week, and Jake spent every evening preparing with Kalith. She was nervous, though she tried to hide it. For a being who had once commanded fleets and ruled thousands, the idea of presenting her ideas to a small group of human administrators seemed to terrify her. "They will see me, and remember only the war," she said one night, reviewing their presentation for the 100th time. "They will see the monster who destroyed Harper's World." Jake set down his datapad. "Did you give the order to glass Harper's World?" Kalith's compound eyes reflected the light strangely. "No. That was my sister queen, Velsha. But I was part of the same hive fleet. I did nothing to stop it. In your human law, that makes me complicit. But you didn't order it. You didn't want it. Want is irrelevant in hive structure." The Empress commanded. And we obeyed. That is how our species survives. Individual want is weakness. "Is that what you still believe?" Jake asked. Kalith was silent for a long moment. "I don't know what I believe anymore. The hive is gone. The Empress abandoned me. Everything I was taught about purpose and duty has become meaningless. And yet I am still here. Still thinking. Still wanting things. It should not be possible." "Maybe that's not weakness," Jake said gently. "Maybe that's strength. The strength to become something new." Before Kalith could respond, Jake's communicator buzzed. It was Danny, the young technician who had been friendly to him. His voice was urgent. "Jake, you need to get to the medical center. Now. There's been an outbreak." Jake and Kalith rushed to the medical facility to find chaos. Dozens of colonists were lying in beds, their skin covered in angry red rashes and burning with fever. The medical staff was overwhelmed, running between patients with desperate efficiency. Lisa, the medical officer, spotted Jake and hurried over. Her face was pale with exhaustion. "It's some kind of infection. Started 3 days ago, with the workers in the southern fields. Now it's spreading. We've tried every antiviral and antibiotic we have. Nothing works. Nothing." "How many infected?" Jake asked. 47 humans so far." "But that's not all." Lisa gestured to a separate ward. "We have 32 Velrathi prisoners, showing the same symptoms. Whatever this is, it crosses species." Kalith moved past them without asking permission, heading straight for the Velrathi ward. Jake followed, with Lisa close behind. The Velrathi prisoners were in bad shape, their carapaces showing strange discoloration and cracks that oozed a greenish fluid. Kalith knelt beside one of the sick Velrathi, examining them closely. She spoke in the Velrathi language, a series of clicks and harmonic sounds that her translator didn't bother to convert. The sick Velrathi responded weakly. "This is Zathi fever," Kalith announced, standing up. "It is a disease from my homeworld. Very dangerous. Very contagious. It jumps between species that live in close proximity. How do we cure it?" Lisa asked. "The traditional remedy requires a specific fungus that grows only in Velrathi caves. You do not have it here." "Then we're dead," Lisa said flatly. "Without a cure, we can't stop the spread." Kalith's antennae twitched rapidly, a sign Jake had learned meant she was thinking intensely. "There may be another way. The fungus produces a chemical compound that disrupts the fever's reproductive cycle. If we can synthesize that compound, using local materials, can you do it?" Jake asked. "I will need equipment, and I will need tissue samples from both infected humans and Velrathi. And I will need time." Lisa didn't hesitate. "You'll have whatever you need. Jake, set her up in Lab 3. I'll get the samples." For the next 72 hours, Jake barely slept. He assisted Kalith in the laboratory, following her instructions as she worked with an intensity he had never seen before. She tested compound after compound. using her knowledge of Velrathi biochemistry to adapt the cure for human physiology. Other scientists came to help, initially reluctant but quickly won over by Kaelith's expertise. She directed them like she had once directed her hive, with absolute confidence and clarity. Some of them started to see her differently, not as a monster, but as a scientist trying to save lives. On the third day, Kaelith finally created a working compound. They tested it on the sickest patients first, both human and Velrathi. Within hours, the fevers began to break. Within a day, the rashes started to fade. By the end of the week, every infected person was recovering. The colony erupted in relief. Lisa made sure everyone knew that Kaelith had developed the cure. Some people were grateful. Others were angry that they owed their lives to a Velrathi. The colony became even more divided than before. Jake pushed forward with his plan to present Kaelith's agricultural improvements to the council. After saving so many lives, he hoped the council would be more receptive. He was wrong. The council chamber was packed when Jake and Kaelith arrived. Word had spread about the presentation, and it seemed like half the colony wanted to witness it. Jake could feel the tension in the air, thick and hostile. Council Chair Gregory opened the meeting with a stern expression. "Morrison, you've requested time to present a proposal regarding our agricultural systems. The council has agreed to hear you out, though I'll be honest, there's significant opposition to allowing a Velrathi to address this body. Kaelith is a scientist and a contributor to this colony," Jake said firmly. "She saved lives during the outbreak. She deserves to be heard." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some supportive, many angry. Jake began the presentation, walking through Kaelith's analysis of the colony's agricultural inefficiencies. The data was solid. The solutions, practical. Several council members leaned forward with interest, asking technical questions that Kaelith answered with calm expertise. Then Councillor Brooks stood up, his face red with anger. "This is outrageous. We're taking advice from the enemy? From a creature responsible for genocide? I have committed no genocide," Kaelith said, her translator giving her words an eerie calm. "I have fought in war, as your soldiers have fought. I have killed, as all soldiers kill. But I have never targeted civilians deliberately." "Harper's World was your fleet," Brooks shouted. 40,000 dead. Children, families, all turned to ash. And you claim innocence? I claim responsibility for my own actions, not for the actions of my sister queen. In your human justice system, is this not how law works? Individual responsibility? The crowd erupted into chaos. Some people shouted agreement with Brooks, calling Kaelith a murderer and worse. Others defended her, pointing out the lives she had saved. The council tried to restore order but failed. Then someone threw something, a piece of debris, maybe part of a broken chair. It flew through the air and struck Kaelith in the head, cracking her already damaged carapace. She staggered but didn't fall. Jake moved to help her. But suddenly there were people rushing toward them from both sides. Some trying to protect them, others trying to attack. Security guards pushed through the crowd, but the situation was spiraling out of control. "Get her out of here," someone shouted. Jake grabbed Kaelith's arm and pulled her toward the exit. They made it to the hallway, but a group of colonists followed them. Jake recognized some of them as people who had lost family in the war. "You think you can just walk in here?" a woman screamed. "You think saving a few lives makes up for the thousands you killed?" "Please," Jake said, stepping between them and Kaelith. "This isn't helping anyone. Get out of the way, Morrison," a man growled. "This doesn't concern you. It concerns me when you try to hurt someone under my protection." Someone shoved Jake hard. He stumbled, but kept his footing. Behind him, he heard Kaelith make a threatening sound, her mandibles clicking rapidly. She was preparing to fight. "Don't," Jake said to her. "Don't give them an excuse." More colonists arrived, and the hallway was getting crowded. Security was trying to push through, but they were blocked. Jake could see the situation was about to turn violent. Then he saw it. A man in the crowd pulling out a plasma pistol, an old military weapon that should have been turned in years ago. The man's hand was shaking, his eyes wild with grief and rage. "For Harper's world," the man whispered, raising the weapon. Jake didn't think. He threw himself backward, slamming into Kaelith and knocking her aside just as the plasma bolt fired. The superheated energy struck Jake in the shoulder, burning through his clothes and flesh. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. He hit the ground hard, his vision going white. He heard Kaelith roar, a sound of pure fury that he had never heard from her before. Through his blurred vision, he saw her move with shocking speed despite her injuries. She grabbed the gunman and threw him into the wall with enough force to crack the metal panel. Then she turned to face the crowd. All four of her arms spread wide, her damaged wings flaring out in a threat display that would have been terrifying even if she were completely healthy. But she didn't attack. Instead, she positioned herself over Jake's body, protecting him from any further assault. Her mandibles clicked out a warning that needed no translation. Security finally broke through, weapons drawn. "Everyone back! Now!" The crowd dispersed quickly, fear overcoming their anger. The gunman was unconscious, and Kaelith still stood over Jake, refusing to move until the medical team arrived. Lisa and her team rushed in with a stretcher. "Kaelith, we need to treat him. Please move." Kaelith looked down at Jake, her compound eyes unreadable. Then, she carefully stepped aside, but stayed close as they loaded Jake onto the stretcher. "You saved his life during the outbreak," Lisa said to Kaelith as they hurried toward the medical center. "Now he's saved yours. I'd say you're even." "No," Kaelith said quietly. "He saved more than my life. He saved my purpose." Jake drifted in and out of consciousness as they worked on him. The plasma burn was serious but not fatal. He would recover, though it would take time. Through the pain, he was aware of Kaelith nearby, refusing to leave despite the medical staff's protests. When he finally woke up hours later, she was sitting beside his bed, perfectly still. Her damaged carapace had new cracks from the fight, and there was human blood on her claws from when she had caught him. "You should not have done that," she said, when she saw his eyes open. "You could have died." "So could you," Jake managed to say, his throat dry. "I am a queen. Dying in battle would have been appropriate. You are a scientist, a builder. Your life has more value than mine." "That's not true." Kaelith leaned closer, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. "I killed your people, Jake Morrison. I led attacks that destroyed human colonies. I am responsible for so much death. Why do you protect me? Why do you treat me as if I have worth?" Jake met her alien gaze steadily. "Because worth isn't about what you were. It's about what you choose to become. You're choosing to save lives now instead of taking them. That matters." Kaelith was silent for a long time. Then she did something Jake had never seen a Velrathi do before. She bowed her head, a gesture of respect that went against everything in her culture's hierarchy. "I understand now," she said. "This is what humans call redemption." "No," Jake said. "This is what humans call friendship." Jake spent 2 weeks recovering from the plasma burn. The physical healing was straightforward, but the aftermath of the attack created complications that medicine couldn't fix. The colony was more divided than ever. Some people called Jake a hero for trying to protect everyone during the chaos. Others called him a traitor for defending Kaelith. The man who shot him was arrested but became a symbol for those who wanted all Velrathi expelled or executed. Kaelith stayed close during Jake's recovery. She helped the medical staff, using her knowledge to improve treatment protocols. Some of the doctors and nurses began to warm to her, seeing past her species to the intelligent, dedicated person underneath. Others refused to work with her and requested transfers. During one of Jake's physical therapy sessions, Lisa sat down beside him with a tired expression. "You know there's footage, right? From the council meeting? Footage?" Jake asked. pausing his exercises. Someone recorded the whole thing on their personal device. The attack, you jumping in front of Kalith, her protecting you afterward. It's spreading through the colony network. Some people are even sending it to other colonies. Jake groaned. That's going to make things worse. Maybe. Or maybe it'll make things better. People are seeing a different side of this situation. Seeing a human and Velrathi protecting each other. It's making some folks reconsider their positions. She was right. But not in the way Jake expected. Over the following days, the footage spread beyond New Haven, reaching other colonies, and eventually the core worlds of human space. The image of Kalith standing protectively over Jake's wounded body became iconic. Reproduced in news articles and opinion pieces across the galaxy, public opinion was sharply divided. Some saw it as proof that reconciliation with the Velrathi was possible. Others saw it as evidence that the Velrathi were manipulating sympathetic humans. Political groups on both sides used the footage to support their agendas. But something unexpected happened among the Velrathi prisoners. Word of Kalith's actions spread through the labor camps, carried by the complex system of pheromone messages and clicking communications that humans still didn't fully understand. Velrathi began asking to see her, to speak with her, to learn from her. One afternoon, a delegation of Velrathi workers arrived at Jake's door. The same older worker who had spoken to Jake at the collapsed building led them. His name was Tixal, and he carried himself with a dignity that his prisoner status couldn't diminish. Queen Kalith, Tixal said formally, bowing his head in the traditional Velrathi gesture of respect. We request your wisdom. Kalith stood in the doorway, clearly uncomfortable with the title and the deference. I am no longer a queen. I have no hive to lead. But you could, another Velrathi said, a younger worker with bright, undamaged carapace. There are hundreds of us here, scattered and purposeless. We need guidance. We need a queen who understands both the old ways and the new. What you're asking is impossible, Kalith said. The Empress would never recognize a hive formed in human space. It would be considered rebellion. The Empress abandoned us, Tixal said bluntly. When the war ended, she recalled the royal hives and left the workers and soldiers to human mercy. We are already rebels by her measure. We have nothing to lose. Jake watched from inside the house as Kalith struggled with this. He could see her antennae twitching rapidly, her mandibles clicking in patterns that suggested deep distress. Finally, she shook her head. I cannot be what I was. The old way of queens is finished. But perhaps, she paused, thinking, perhaps I can be something new. She paused. Also 40. Not a queen who controls through pheromones and neural bonds, but a teacher. A guide. Someone who helps you find your own paths. The Velrathi workers exchanged glances, communicating in ways Jake couldn't perceive. Then, Tixal clicked his mandibles in agreement. Then we would learn from you, teacher queen. Show us how to live in this new world. Over the following weeks, Kalith began meeting regularly with groups of Velrathi prisoners. She taught them about human culture, helped them understand their rights under colonial law, and most importantly, encouraged them to think as individuals. It went against everything in traditional Velrathi culture, and many of the older workers struggled with the concepts. But the younger ones, especially those who had been separated from their hives at a young age, embraced it eagerly. Jake helped however he could, providing space for the meetings and running interference with colonial authorities who were suspicious of any Velrathi gathering. He also started teaching basic human language and customs to interested Velrathi, creating informal exchange sessions where humans and Velrathi could learn from each other. Danny, the young technician, became one of the regular human participants. It's weird, he told Jake one day. I spent 3 years fighting these guys. Lost friends to them, but talking to them like this, hearing their stories, they're just people. Scared. Lost people trying to figure out how to survive. That's what I've been trying to tell everyone, Jake said. But not everyone was supportive. Captain Harris called Jake into his office again. His expression, grave. Morrison, I've received complaints about unauthorized gatherings of Velrothi prisoners. Multiple reports say you and that queen are organizing them. They're educational sessions, Jake said. Completely peaceful. We're helping them integrate into colonial society. Or you're helping them organize resistance. Do you have any idea how this looks? A former enemy commander gathering her forces right under our noses? Kalith isn't organizing forces. She's teaching language classes and cultural exchange. Harris leaned back in his chair, studying Jake carefully. You really believe in this, don't you? You think you can bridge the gap between our species through friendship and education? I think we have to try. The war is over. We can either spend the next century hating each other, or we can build something better. Idealistic nonsense, Harris muttered, but there was less hostility in his voice than before. But I'll admit, the footage from the attack has created some interesting political pressure. There are people in high places asking questions about our treatment of Velrothi prisoners. Some are even suggesting expanded rights and integration programs. That's good, isn't it? Maybe. Or maybe it's dangerous. Change this big, this fast. It makes people nervous. Nervous people do stupid things. Harris stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the colony. I'm going to give you some advice, Morrison. Watch your back. The people who support you are getting louder. But so are the people who hate what you're doing. And hatred is a powerful motivator. Jake took the warning seriously. He started varying his routes home, paying more attention to his surroundings. He also made sure Kylith did the same, but despite the precautions, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was building. Some confrontation that neither of them could avoid. The breaking point came from an unexpected direction. A group of hardline Velrothi prisoners, led by a former soldier named Krozix, began speaking out against Kylith's teachings. They believed that cooperation with humans was betrayal, that maintaining traditional Velrothi culture was more important than survival. Krozix confronted Kylith during one of her teaching sessions, his carapace painted with traditional war markings. You disgrace our people, he hissed, in the Velrothi language. Teaching our young to abandon the hive structure, to think like humans. You are no queen. You are a corrupted thing, poisoned by human softness. Kylith stood calmly in the face of his anger. The old ways died with the war, Krozix. The Empress herself proved that, when she abandoned us, we must adapt or perish. Better to perish with honor than survive as slaves to human thought. Is it slavery to choose your own path? Is it dishonor to learn new ways while remembering the old? Kylith's voice remained calm, but Jake could hear the steel underneath. I do not ask anyone to forget where they came from. I ask only that they consider where they might go. The confrontation ended without violence. But the division among the Velrothi prisoners deepened. Some followed Kylith's path, embracing change and integration. Others rallied around Krozix, clinging to traditional values and viewing the humans with unending hostility. Then came the news that changed everything. A diplomatic mission from the core Velrothi territories was coming to New Haven. The remnants of the Velrothi Empire, now reorganized under Empress Shiala, wanted to inspect the conditions of their people in human captivity, and they specifically requested to meet with Kylith. Jake found Kylith standing outside that evening, looking up at the stars. Her posture was tense, her antennae barely moving. Are you afraid? Jake asked, joining her. The Empress was my sister, Kylith said quietly. We shared a hive mother. Were raised together. When the war came, she received the royal throne, and I was given a military fleet. She was always the stronger, the more ambitious. And when I failed, when my fleet was scattered and I was captured, she did nothing to retrieve me. She left me to die. What do you think she wants now? To prove a point. To show the other Velrothi what happens to those who fail. Or perhaps... Kylith paused. Perhaps to eliminate a threat. A fallen queen who teaches new ideas is dangerous to the old order. I won't let anyone hurt you, Jake said firmly. Kylith's mandibles clicked softly, a sound Jake had learned meant affection or gratitude. You have done more than save me, Jake Morrison. You have shown me that worth is not given by station or birth. It is earned through choice and action. Whatever happens when the Empress arrives, I will not hide. I will stand and speak my truth. Then I'll stand with you. Over the next week, the colony prepared for the diplomatic visit. It would be the first formal contact between human and Velrathi governments since the armistice. Tensions were high, security was doubled, and everyone felt the weight of what was coming. Kylith spent the time working on a document. Something she said was a philosophical treatise on the future of Velrathi culture. She wrote it in both Velrathi and human languages, and she asked Jake to review the human translation. Reading it, Jake was struck by the depth of her thought. She argued for a new vision of Velrathi society, one that preserved their cultural identity while adapting to a changing galaxy. She proposed that queens could lead through wisdom and teaching rather than biological control. That individual Velrathi could have rights while still maintaining community bonds, that cooperation with other species was strength rather than weakness. This is revolutionary, Jake said. If other Velrathi hear this, it could change everything, or it could get me killed, Kylith said practically. But it must be said, too many Velrathi are suffering because they cannot adapt. If my words can help even a few find a new path, then the risk is worthwhile. The night before the diplomatic mission arrived, Kylith asked Jake a question that surprised him. Do you believe humans and Velrathi can truly coexist? Not just survive near each other, but build something together? Jake thought about it carefully. I believe we can. I believe we have to. The galaxy is too big and too dangerous for any one species to face alone. We need each other, even if we don't realize it yet. Then we are both idealists, Kylith said. Two fools, hoping for a better future. Maybe. But sometimes fools change the world. Kylith was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out with one of her functioning hands and gently touched Jake's shoulder. It was the first time she had initiated physical contact, and the gesture meant more than words could express. Whatever happens tomorrow, she said. Thank you for seeing me as more than an enemy. Thank you for giving me a chance to become something new. You did that yourself, Jake said. I just gave you the space to do it, Jake said, and they stood together in comfortable silence, two unlikely friends on the eve of a meeting that could determine the future of both their species. The diplomatic ship arrived at dawn, a sleek Velrathi vessel that still bore the scars of war on its hull. The landing was smooth and precise, and when the ramp lowered, Empress Shiala emerged surrounded by her royal guard. She was magnificent, her carapace gleaming with deep purple and gold patterns, her four arms adorned with ceremonial markings that denoted her status as supreme ruler of what remained of the Velrathi Empire. Jake stood with the human delegation in the landing area, watching as the formal greeting protocols were observed. Beside him, Kylith stood tall despite her damaged carapace and broken arms. She had refused to hide her injuries, saying they were part of her story now. The human colonial governor, a stern woman named Helen Carter, stepped forward to greet the Empress. The translation devices crackled to life as diplomatic pleasantries were exchanged. Security on both sides remained tense, but professional. Then Shiala's compound eyes found Kylith in the crowd. The Empress's antennae went completely still, a Velrathi expression of shock or anger. Sister, Shiala said, her voice carrying across the landing area. You look diminished. Kylith bowed her head respectfully, but didn't lower her eyes. Empress, I am honored by your presence. Are you? I would have thought shame would be your primary emotion. A queen reduced to living among humans like a common worker. The insult hung in the air. Jake felt his fists clench, but he forced himself to remain calm. This was Kylith's moment. She needed to handle it her way. I am not ashamed, Kalith said clearly. I have found purpose here. I have saved lives, both human and Velrathi. I have learned and taught. I have become more than I was. Shiala's mandibles clicked in dismissive laughter. More? You have become a pet, a curiosity for humans to parade around. You disgrace the royal line. The royal line disgraced itself when it abandoned its people, Kalith replied, her voice still calm but with an edge now. Where were you, sister? When the workers and soldiers were left in human camps? Where was the royal concern then? A ripple of clicking sounds came from the Velrathi prisoners who had gathered to watch. Jake realized that Kayalith was speaking not just to the Empress, but to all the Velrathi present. She was making a public statement. Shiala's posture shifted to aggressive. You dare question the Empress? You, who failed your mission and allowed yourself to be captured. I question policies that value power over the welfare of our people. I question a culture that treats its members as disposable tools. And yes, I question an Empress who would leave thousands to suffer rather than acknowledge their existence. The tension was electric. The human security forces raised their alert level, and the Velrathi guards moved closer to their Empress. Governor Carter looked like she wanted to intervene but held back, sensing this was something that needed to play out. Shiala took a step toward Kayalith. You have been corrupted by human thinking. You speak of individual welfare as if it matters more than the hive. You have forgotten what it means to be Velrathi. No, Kalith said, standing her ground. I have remembered what the old philosophers taught before the war consumed everything. That a hive is only as strong as its weakest member. That a queen serves her people, not the other way around. That wisdom and compassion are not weakness, but the foundation of true leadership. She reached into a pouch at her side and pulled out a data device. I have written a treatise on the future of our people. It outlines a new path forward, one that honors our culture, while adapting to the reality we now face. I would ask that you read it, Empress, and consider whether the old ways still serve us. Shiala looked at the device as if it were poisonous. I do not need lessons from a failed queen living in disgrace. Then perhaps the Velrathi people do. Let them decide for themselves whether my words have merit. The challenge was unmistakable. Kayalith was essentially asking the Empress to allow public discourse on matters of culture and governance, something the traditional Velrathi hierarchy would never permit. It was revolutionary and dangerous. Before Shiala could respond, Tixal stepped forward from the crowd of Velrathi prisoners. He bowed deeply to the Empress, then turned to Kayalith. Teacher Queen, he said, using the title the prisoners had given her. We would hear your words. Many of us have lost our way in this new world. We need guidance that understands both where we came from and where we must go. Other Velrathi began to step forward, adding their voices to Tixal's. Young and old, workers and former soldiers. They gathered around Kayalith in a show of support that shocked everyone present. Shiala's guards moved to intervene, but the Empress raised a hand to stop them. Her eyes moved across the gathered Velrathi, assessing the situation. Finally, she looked back at Kayalith. You have built yourself a following among the defeated and displaced. How very human of you. They are not defeated, Kayalith said. They are adapting, surviving, choosing to build rather than simply endure. That is not weakness, sister. That is the strength our species needs to survive in a galaxy we no longer dominate. Before Shiala could reply, alarms suddenly blared across the colony. Jake's communicator buzzed urgently, and Governor Carter's face went pale as she received an emergency message. We have a situation, Carter announced. Multiple contacts on sensors. Unknown ships approaching the colony at high speed. The mood shifted instantly from diplomatic tension to potential combat crisis. Both human and Velrathi forces went to high alert. On the view screens scattered around the landing area, images appeared of 6 ships entering the system. They were Velrathi designs, but their markings were wrong. Their formations aggressive. Pirates, Shiala said with disgust. Scavengers who prey on weak colonies during these uncertain times. They must have heard of the diplomatic mission and hoped to catch us unprepared. Can your ship handle them? Carter asked. Alone? No. They outnumber us 3-1. Jake's mind raced. The colony had minimal defenses, designed to handle small threats, but nothing like a coordinated pirate attack. If those ships reached the surface, hundreds could die. Kalith stepped forward. I know their tactics. Pirate clans often use former military commanders who were dishonored during the war. I can predict their approach patterns, and I can help coordinate the defense, Jake added. I was a combat engineer. I know how to maximize what we have. Shiala looked at them both, her expression unreadable. Then she clicked her mandibles in decision. Very well. Kylith, you will work with my tactical officer. Human Morrison, you will coordinate with your people. We will defend this colony together. The next hours were a blur of activity. Kalith worked with the Velrathi and human commanders, analyzing the pirate attack patterns and predicting their strategies. Jake organized civilian defenses and worked with the engineering teams to maximize the colony's shield generators and weapons platforms. The pirates came in hard and fast, using the exact tactics Kylith had predicted. The combined human Velrathi defense met them with coordinated fire, ships working in tandem in ways that would have been impossible before the armistice. Shiala's ship and the colony's defense platforms focused fire, while Jake's hastily assembled civilian volunteers provided support and evacuated vulnerable areas. One pirate ship broke through the defensive line, heading straight for the landing area where the civilians had gathered. Jake watched in horror as it descended, weapons charging for what would be a devastating strike. Then Kylith's voice came over the communications system, speaking in Velrathi. Jake's translator picked it up a moment later. This is Queen Kalith of the 7th Hive Fleet. You dare attack under my watch? You dare threaten those I have sworn to protect? Know this, Raiders. I have fought and bled for this colony. I have sacrificed everything for these people, human and Velrathi alike. If you strike here, you strike at me personally, and I will not forgive. The pirate ship hesitated. Through the communications array, Jake heard frantic clicking from the raider crew. They knew that name. They knew what Kalith had been. The ship turned away, breaking off its attack. The other pirates, seeing their momentum broken and facing coordinated resistance, retreated as well. Within an hour, the system was clear. In the aftermath, as emergency crews tended to minor damage and injuries, Empress Shiala approached Kalith and Jake. Her posture was different now. Less hostile. More thoughtful. You saved many lives today, Shiala said. Human and Velrathi both. Even the pirates recognized your authority, sister. They feared you more than they feared an empress. They feared what I represented. Kalith corrected. A queen who fights not for conquest but for protection. Who leads not through force but through earned respect. Shiala was quiet for a long moment. Then she took the data device Kalith had offered earlier. I will read your treatise, and I will distribute it among our people, not as official policy, but as a perspective worth considering. The war has changed us all, perhaps more than we realized. We must decide what kind of people we will become. That is all I ask, Kalith said. The chance for our people to choose their own path forward. Over the following days, negotiations between the human and Velrathi governments took on a new tone. The shared defense had created a foundation of practical cooperation that diplomacy alone could not have achieved. Treaties were drafted to improve conditions for Velrathi prisoners, establish cultural exchange programs, and create pathways for integration of those who wish to live in human space. Kylith's treatise spread rapidly through Velrathi communities, both in human space and in the remnant Empire territories. It sparked fierce debates, with traditional authorities denouncing it while younger Velrathi embraced its ideas. The divisions it created were painful, but they were also necessary. Change always was. 6 months later, Jake stood in a formal assembly hall on New Haven, watching as Governor Carter prepared to make an important announcement. The hall was packed with humans and Velrathi, sitting together in a way that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. Today we recognize extraordinary service to this colony and to the cause of peace, Carter announced. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison has shown exceptional courage, compassion, and vision in his work to bridge the divide between our species. For his service, he is awarded the Colonial Star of Honor. Jake stepped forward to accept the medal, feeling awkward in his dress uniform. The crowd applauded, but he noticed it was mixed. Some people clapped enthusiastically, others barely at all. The colony was still divided, but less than before. Additionally, Carter continued, we grant full colonial citizenship to Kalith, former queen of the 7th Hive Fleet, in recognition of her invaluable contributions to medicine, agriculture, education, and defense. She is the first Velrathi to receive this honor, and I hope not the last. The applause was louder now, though still mixed. Kaelith stepped forward, her damaged carapace gleaming under the lights. Someone had helped her paint traditional Velrathi honor markings on her arms, modified to include symbols representing her new path. I do not accept this honor alone, Kaelith said, her voice carrying clearly through the translator. I accept it on behalf of all Velrathi who seek a new future, and all humans who have shown us that enemies can become friends. A year ago, I was given to Jake Morrison as a cruel joke, a way to mock his compassion, but he saw not a monster, but a person, and in seeing me that way, he allowed me to see myself differently. She turned to look at Jake. You raised me, not through pity or charity, but through respect and friendship. You showed me that worth is not defined by power or status, but by choice and action. I was a queen who ruled through biological dominance. Now I am a teacher who leads through earned wisdom. I am higher now than I ever was before, not because of any throne, but because I have learned what true leadership means. The applause was thunderous now, and Jake saw tears in the eyes of some of the listeners, both human and Velrathi. This was a moment that would be remembered, a turning point in the relationship between two species that had been at war. After the ceremony, Jake and Kaelith stood outside, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. In the distance, construction crews worked on the new cultural center, a joint project where humans and Velrathi would learn together. We're really doing it, Jake said. Building something new. Yes, Kaelith agreed. Though the path will not be easy, there is still much hatred, much fear, on both sides. But there's also hope. And that's a start. Mine. Rezing. Mine. 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 Kaelith clicked her mandibles in the pattern Jake had learned meant contentment. I have been thinking about our next project. A school where young humans and Velrathi can learn together from childhood. If we can teach the next generation to see each other as individuals rather than enemies, imagine what they might build. I like it. We should write a proposal. We will need support, funding, political backing. We'll get it. People are starting to see what's possible. Your treatise is changing minds. The joint defense showed what cooperation can achieve. We'll make them understand. End quote. They stood in comfortable silence for a while. Then Kaelith spoke again. Do you ever regret it? Taking me in when your people mocked you? Defending me when it made you a target? Jake thought about it honestly. The past year had been difficult, full of conflict and danger and loss, but it had also been meaningful in ways he had never experienced before. No, he said finally, not even for a moment. You're my friend, Kaelith, one of the best friends I've ever had. Whatever happens next, we'll face it together. Together, Kaelith repeated. A very human concept, but I find I like it. In the distance, a group of young Velrathi and human children played together, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. They had been born during or after the war, And for them, the old hatred was just history. They saw each other not as enemies, but as classmates and friends. Jake smiled, watching them. This was what they had been fighting for. Not just peace, but the possibility of genuine friendship between species. The joke that had brought him and Kylith together had become the foundation of something bigger than either of them had imagined. A fallen queen, given as a mockery. But through compassion, respect, and genuine friendship, she had risen higher than she had ever stood before. Not as a ruler, but as a bridge between worlds. Not as a conqueror, but as a teacher and a friend. And beside her stood a human who had refused to see an enemy when everyone told him to. Who had chosen compassion over hatred, understanding over prejudice. Together, they had proven that the greatest strength came not from domination, but from the courage to see the potential in others and help them become something new. The sun set on New Haven, and tomorrow would bring new challenges. But Jake and Kylith would face them as they had faced everything else, together.